Okay, so on to chapter 2 of the book Ink by Alice Broadway. Now this is a long chapter, so bear with me. The morning after we open Dad's book, Mum goes back to work. She says that it is time, that we need to go back to our normal lives, or at least work out what our new normal is going to be. Normal is very important to Mum. She's always been effortlessly popular, sociable and busy, committed to the community, and I think she's always been a bit bewildered that her own daughter is such a loner. I decide to get out of the house too, but head to the market. There is no school today. My year are all on study leave. I know I have to engage with all that again, with revision and final exams. I'll have to work hard too to make up for the time I've missed having to be an inker, which is all I've ever wanted. I walk along the pavement, which is rippled by tree roots beneath, and I wonder when we'll get a date for Dad's weighing of the soul ceremony. The most time-consuming part has already happened in the month since Dad died. The flaying, the tanning, the binding of his skin into a book. Now the people at the government need to study his finished book and prepare his case before the ceremony can happen, and then he can come home, back with us, where he belongs. The weighing of the soul ceremony is where the leaders announce their final decision about the destiny of your soul. They will have studied Dad's book and judged whether he has led a worthy enough life. The worthy go home with their family and are placed among their ancestors, and are read and remembered forever. Their soul is safe in the afterlife. If you're found unworthy, your soul is destroyed in flames along with your book. I've never seen it happen, but they say you never forget the smell of a burning skin book. That won't be Dad though. No one could have led a better or purer life. Closer to town the roads narrow, until the pavement is just wide enough for one person. Walking down the dusty street, I sneak looks into the windows of the terrace homes I pass. The higgledy buildings are each painted different colours and face right onto the pavement. When I was little, I used to tell myself stories about the streets like this. I used to imagine a giant had squeezed a row of houses, making each one skinny and creating wobbly roofs of different heights. Now I tell myself different stories. As I peep into the leaded windows and wonder about the lives within. When people don't close their curtains, I take it as an invitation to guess at who lives there and what their life is like. I am so engrossed in looking that I almost bump into a man picking the dead petals from the red geraniums in his window box. I step around him quickly, one foot in the road, inhaling a sharp bitterness of the dying flowers. I keep walking and, in my mind, I turn the pages of Dad's book. I feel my shoulders relax. It was a beautiful relief to see him last night. Mum seemed like a different person when we left the museum. She sighed so loudly when we reached the final page. I thought at first that something was wrong, but when I turned to look, she was smiling. She was right too. His skin tells such a good tale. When someone reads your book, they should be able to read your life story. They can weigh the good against the bad and know if you're worthy. Everything important goes on our skin, because otherwise it stays in our soul, and no one wants their soul weighed down, either by pride at their good deeds or by guilt at their transgressions. We mark our bodies to keep our souls unfettered. Only the worthy attain remembrance, and to do that your good must outweigh your bad, and your soul must be free. I smile at the thought of Dad's pure soul, ready to be counted worthy. I am longing for the day of his weighing to come. Dad was a flayer. His friends at work will have been the ones to slice his skin and make it ready for the tanners. He did the same for their loved ones and for the countless unknown people that came their way each day. Mum is a reader. It's more of a calling than a job, I suppose, but it does pay. It's hard to explain what makes someone a reader, but the best way is that some of us can read the meanings behind marks. We can see beyond the immediate message to what the ink expresses about that person's heart. My mum can look at your family tree and tell who is the favourite child. She can look at the age marks on your hand and tell which year almost broke you. She can look at the marks that describe your qualifications and tell whether you cheated. People admire readers, but they also fear them. Mum once told me that everyone has secrets they want to keep. We shouldn't really have secrets though. That's the whole point. I have the gift too. I've been able to read people since I was a child. Mum says she worked it out when I got into trouble in my first week at school. I had asked the boy why he didn't live with his real dad. When his angry mum showed up at the door demanding to know who had been gossiping about them, Mum knew I must have read between the lines on the boy's skin. But just because I can do it doesn't mean I want to do it as my job. I love the glimpse it gives me into people's marks and lives, but sometimes I get tired of ink shouting out in the inner world of strangers as they pass by. I don't think I could bear their anxious faces if they were sitting across the reading table from me, knowing that if their marks chose to reveal the truth, I could see everything. No, my dream is to be an inker. All I can hope is that I do well enough in my exams, which aren't looking as straightforward as they once were. I've missed so much time with Dad not being well. I've always got good grades at school without having to try too hard, so being anxious is a first for me. As I near the centre of town, the houses turn into rows of shops. I pass the bakery, a florist, and the leather workers' place, where we get our shoes and bags mended. The dusty path becomes cobbles, and the narrow street I'm on takes me to the town square. In the middle of the large square is a small comfort blanket of green, standing out bright against the stone and timber of the buildings surrounding it. And at its centre is the statue of Saint, the most important leader in our history. He stands in the middle of our bustling town, a tall figure in bronze, smooth, robed and watching us. I've always loved his story, the tale we tell to remind us of his faithfulness, the power of stories, and of the soul-freeing necessity of flaying the dead. And of course, he stands there as a warning to us about the despicable ways of the blanks. Footpaths cross the square, corner to corner, and people stroll along them chatting and trying to find a path of grass between the footpaths where they can sit and drink their coffee. The square is where you can really get a sense of what matters in Saintstone, and if things matter here, they matter everywhere. All the towns around depend on us. Saintstone is where the government is based, where all the decisions of any importance are made. I like living in the centre of things. I'm not sure how it would feel to be in one of the smaller towns, where everyone thinks they know you, even before they've seen your ink. Depending on which way the wind is blowing, you can usually smell the smoke from the Hall of Judgment. It's a large circular building made of stone and coloured glass, which tapers up to the wide chimney. The fire is always lit, the smoke creating permanent grey-brown clouds over the town. It's where the weighing of the soul ceremonies happen, and where Mum and I go when it's our turn to speak the names of the dead. It's also where the matters of faith are taught and upheld. Our school teachers train there. Our spiritual education and formation is just as important as our academic attainment. On this side of the square, behind me as I walk, is a museum, my favourite place. It's raised high with steps all around it. It towers over us, all stone pillars and arched windows. It looks dark and imposing from here. But when you go inside, it's bright and cosy. Dad used to take me there all the time. I swallow, feeling a sudden chill in the shadow of the building, and hurry on. Across the square, beyond the grass and trees and benches, I see an unexpected bustle and commotion. People are setting up loudspeakers on a temporary platform that is being constructed outside the government building. A giant L-shaped box taking up two sides of the square. There must be a meeting I've forgotten about. People are gathering round. Some are getting up from their benches to get a closer look, and there is a low hum of conversation. Seeing the government building makes me realise I've not been called for my truth-telling test in a while. I should expect it soon, I suppose. We're meant to have one every few years to allow us to confess. The image of Dad taking me for the first time when I was nearly 14 flashes brightly in my mind. Dad had assured me it was nothing to worry about, but that hadn't stopped me being scared. We'd all been told about the machine that reads your pulse and temperature and beeps if you're lying, but I'd never seen it. My imagination had convinced me that it was definitely going to hurt. I was certain that this would be the moment that would be found out. I thought of all the little lies I'd told my parents and times I'd sneaked an extra biscuit when I'd been told I'd had enough. I even had nightmares about accidentally confessing to a crime I hadn't committed. It was an anticlimax when we were shown from the main reception and led into a small, completely plain room with white walls, 2 chairs, a wooden table, and a small contraption that was nothing more than a dull and battered-looking metal dome, with a light attached and wires coming out of it. A man with a notebook was waiting and gestured for me to sit down. But when Dad saw how nervous I was, he asked if he could go first. He sat in the chair, placed his left hand on the dome, and looked at me with a smile and a roll of his eyes that said, "This is a breeze." He answered all the questions calmly, and the machine did nothing. I was relieved that the questions weren't too hard. Just general queries about new marks and a list of crimes Dad had to confirm he hadn't committed. The man wrote down the odd notes, and when he was done, he smiled at Dad and told him he could stand up. "Your conscience is clear, Mr. Flint. Good, good." He smiled as though this was all a bit of fun and then looked my way. "Your turn now," he chuckled. "I promise, you won't feel a thing." I sat down and took a deep breath, but the moment I put my hand on the machine, it began to screech. I snatched my hand away in horror. What happened? I remember wanting to cry and looking at Dad incredulously. He was trying not to smile. The man was smiling. "Don't worry, I hadn't reset it properly." Dad was properly laughing now. "Maybe you've got more to hide than I thought, Leora," he said. I turned to him and scowled. In the end, the whole thing was fine. I was asked the same things as Dad, plus a couple tailored for someone my age, like whether I've ever cheated in school. The machine remained blissfully silent, and Dad bought me cake on the way home to make up for laughing at me. Cutting through the path between the Hall of Judgment and the government building, heading towards the market stalls beyond it, I realised I'm smiling. I wish he was here. It's cool today, the first day with chilling it this winter. The shock of it has made everyone wrap themselves in extra layers. It's strange to see less skin. I feel a little cut off walking past people when I can only see the marks on their faces and forearms. It feels good though. I feel less naked today, and not simply because of the linen shawl wrapped around me and buttoned at my shoulder. Just sometimes, and I would never say this out loud, it feels nice to hide my marks. The market is here most days, and I plunge into a mass of striped canopies, yells, and people. I try not to breathe in as I walk past the butcher. The smell of meat hanging there makes me feel queasy. I gasp air once I reach the fabric stall. The earthy fragrance of the cotton and the spiciness of the dyes are alluring. Inhaling the colours, I imagine my breath coming out in rainbow puffs. I walk amongst the crowds, watching the ground ahead of my feet. It's easier this way. Just for today, I want to tune out the snippets of conversation and let people's marks become background noise. I feel content to only have Dad's marks in my mind while the memory is still fresh. I follow my nose until I can make out the fruity tang of the grocer's stall. Wooden boxes hold the grocer's wares, propped up so we can be tempted by their deliciousness. The grocer is smiling, his green apron dusted slightly with dirt. He holds a paper bag open and waiting to take my order. His sleeves are pushed up. We're always meant to have our forearms on display, and I can see so much of him from them. He's 36 and bright, the smartest in his class. Clever enough to have had the pick of trades, but there's death in his marks. I read of a youth cut short by the pattern of his older brother. He looks happy now, though, and his marks twist to tell me he has a family. I read joy in his ink. There's abundance in his life beyond the glut of apples and beans in the boxes around him. I ask the grocer for onions and begin to fill a brown paper bag of my own with grubby potatoes. The carrots look good, and the tomatoes smell fresh and sweet. "Do you know what's happening in the square?" I ask. "There's a stage set up and loads of people are gathering." He shakes the bag of onions and swings it closed, holding the corners tightly. "Haven't you heard? There's going to be a public marking," he says as I pass the bag of potatoes for him to weigh. I hear suppressed excitement in his voice, and something else too. Is it fair? There's not been one for years. A lot of things have passed me by recently. I've been so caught up with Dad. I glanced down the street, hesitating. I've only ever heard about public markings in school, and I'm intrigued. I pay the grocer, pick up my bag, and join the crowd heading towards the square. Someone's shoulder bumps mine in their rush to get by me. Voices rise, and as I get closer, the path is packed with everyone drawn to the centre of town to see what's going to happen. By the time I reach the square, a large crowd has already clustered around the stage, and I'm stuck near the back. A woman next to me nods and leans towards me. Her eyes are bright with excitement. "They say Mayor Longsight is coming here today," she says breathlessly. I'm not the type to pay much attention to politics, but there's something about Dan Longsight that seems to have made everyone take a little more notice, even the kids in my class. He became mayor about 6 months ago, and he's totally different from the doddery old men we've had before. He's handsome for one, and younger than most other politicians. For the first time in a while, people are excited about change. I remember the excitement we all felt at his inauguration, when we recited the words that invested him with our hopes and trust. He is good, he is wise, he is the best of us. He is not cruel, he loves us, we will not fear. He does all things for our good. I believe those words so strongly my heart nearly beat out of my chest. He's brought in changes too, which we studied in history class with Mrs. Oldham. We needed these changes, he said. It was like we'd got lost somewhere. We used to know who we were, what we stood for, and we used to be sure of our strength. That seemed to get more and more diluted with each weak leader that preceded Longsight. His government wanted to bring us back to our roots, to a society where our marks matter, where their power is taken seriously, and where we truly see they have the power to change our eternity. So, Mayor Longsight and his supporters wear as little as possible, to show that they have nothing to hide. Anyone can see their marks and know their lives. Mrs. Oldham looked embarrassed when she explained this to us. I assume she's the type who feels our marks should be private. After seeing him on the screen and studying him so much at school, the idea that I might actually get to see him sends an excited shiver down my spine. I'm relieved that none of the old mayors shared his views. I don't think I'd have liked to see too much of their skin. Mayor Longsight, from what I've seen so far, might not be too bad. Some say he is Saint Reborn, come to purify our hearts and our community. All I know is that it feels like change is coming, change for the better. Everyone is pushing, trying to edge closer to the stage so they've got a good view. There is constant chatter. It seems everyone else is just as intrigued as I am. There's a strange intensity, and I hear small arguments break out over feet that have been stepped on and latecomers pushing in. The staging is made of wooden sections, and there are speakers on each end of it. Thick black fabric encloses the stage at the back and sides, flapping in the breeze. There's a wooden block in the centre of the stage, and I wonder what it's for. The murmur of the crowd builds and builds, but moments later, when a tall, dark figure walks onto the stage, the atmosphere changes. No one needs to tell us to be quiet. It feels like even the birds are taking a moment of silence to stop and gaze in awe of him. A long minute passes, and then cheers start, and we clap and whoop as Mayor Longsight steps towards the microphone. He raises his hands, and eventually the noise subsides, becoming a bustling murmur as we wait for him to speak. He clears his throat, and his ineffable authority seems to resound through the square. He moves closer to the large microphone. He's even taller than I expected, and he stands so composed and straight, his confidence shining from him like rays of warm sunshine. I can't believe he's here, right in front of me. "Thank you," he says, and the crowd falls completely silent. "Thank you for being here on this momentous occasion." Underneath the tinny quality of the loudspeakers, his voice is rich. I wonder what it would be like to hear him speak without amplifiers. What an honour it is to gather in this way, to stand together as a community, united, united. He hesitates for a moment and then goes on. Against evil. There is an uneasy murmur from the crowd, and I feel cold despite my shawl. Yes, against evil, he goes on. For I am here to tell you what many have suspected. These are dark times. He pauses and looks around at us all. He's wearing nothing more than a simple loincloth. But he doesn't shiver in the chill air. Despite this, from the distance, it's hard to read him. I wish I could see the elegant tattoos on his shining black skin more clearly. You are gathered here to witness something which will be new to many of you, the first public marking in many decades. Some of you, the respected older members of our community, might remember seeing public markings like this before. You know what to expect. You remember those days, better days I would say. But for the rest of us, this is something we've only read about in our school books. He's right. We've all studied markings, but no one I know has seen one. You know that I honour and admire the leaders that have gone before me, and they, in their wisdom, he pauses briefly, and we all know that he means the opposite, chose to do away with certain parts of our tradition. But it's time. It's time we return to the old ways, for all our sakes. In these dangerous, dangerous days, we must recover our heritage and not forget the decisions our ancestors made. At this, he is interrupted by an enormous cheer. He signals to quiet and smiles broadly. For too long, my friends, we have seen truly abhorrent crimes treated as mere misdemeanours. This must stop. Punishment must be meaningful once more. And so, although today is momentous, soon it will be more common to see a marking in the square. Not frequently. A public marking is not something to be given lightly. But for the most heinous crimes, yes. We cannot continue to gloss over the sins happening within our own society. There is more applause, and he waits before continuing. He doesn't seem to crave applause. He looks almost embarrassed by it. For too long, we have allowed ourselves to slip into apathy. But now we cannot afford not to be vigilant. There has always been a threat from the blanks. No one believed that they really went quietly after the Great Expulsion, but we chose to think that they were living peacefully, posing no risk to us. And yet, I am here today to tell you that we are paying the price for our apathy. Another murmur, almost a groan, rises up from the crowd, and I feel my heart thudding in my chest. Yes, we have evidence that the blanks are plotting. They have taken advantage of our weakness. They want to infiltrate and dilute us by weakening our hearts and our morals. You may have heard it yourself. One person at the market says, "The blanks weren't all bad." A friend tells you they heard the blanks are a peace-loving people. And a work colleague admits they wonder if the blank resettlement bill wasn't perhaps a bit harsh. And you admire the spirit of your friends, moderate, optimistic, liberal, and open. He pauses and lets his words settle. Drip, drip, drip. The propaganda from the blank spies in our midst, oh yes, they have spies, is subtle, but insidious. They have supporters, rebels within our own community, who willingly feed you lies. They let you believe that they are offering you a light to warm yourself by, nice words that make you feel the blanks are no threat and that you are safe. You settle down by the light of their fire. Their words whisper peace and ease. You believe you are finally able to rest. But while you are asleep, the rebels will strike, and their small, warming flames will become a forest fire that destroys you, destroys everything. He stares at us from the stage, his eyes blazing, and then he roars, wake up and rise up." His shout stuns me. Our unguardedness has led us into danger. We have been too willing to trust, and the blanks have found a foothold and are ready to take advantage of our guileless acceptance that all is well, but no more. Looking around, I see shocked faces. This is not what we expected to hear. This sounds like a rallying cry, a call to war. We will be ready. We will be alert, always watchful, always wary of the snakes within our ranks. We will recover our purity and reclaim history and make it our present. It is time, don't you think? Caught up in Mayor Longsight's fervour, we applaud and stamp, and Mayor Longsight signals to someone off stage, hidden by the black curtain. He waits until we are absolutely silent, bows his head, as though he is praying. There is a long, still moment. Then he looks up, right at us. I have serious news. Here today is the proof that the blanks are rising up. It will come as a shock to many, for the man to be punished today walked amongst you. Many of you considered him your friend. He draws a deep breath and then bites out the words. The judgment was made last week that Connor Drew, one of our esteemed flayers, entrusted with our precious dead, is guilty of skin stealing. A ripple of shock pulses through the crowd and I shudder. I don't know who Connor Drew is. He's a flayer, so Dad may have done. But the idea that anyone would steal skin makes me feel ill. I think of my dad on the flayer's table and how precious his skin is. Without the skin there is nothing. No story, no way to live on in the hearts and minds of loved ones left behind. Who would dare steal someone's story, and why? Mayor Longsight signals to one of his aides, and a man is brought onto the stage by two enormous guards. They're obviously here to protect us from the criminal. Or protect him from us, perhaps? I think as the crowd hisses ominously. The man has chains around his ankles, but his hands are free, his arms held tightly by the men either side of him. He wears a loincloth like Mayor Longsight's, only this man's is dirty white and looks ragged. His skin is black like Longsight's, only he appears grey with tiredness and defeat. Following the men onto the platform is the town storyteller, Mel. She's not much older than I am, but she holds our stories on her skin. She embodies our aims and ideals. If Mel is here, this is even more serious than I first thought. You know your history, my friends. You know how the blanks work to break our spirits. They remove people's marks so that their souls will be forever incomplete. And this man, Connor Drew, may be marked in body, but he is a blank in spirit. For he removed skin, of course he did, he is a flayer. But instead of letting it be stitched into a book, he kept it for himself. In stealing one piece, he is guilty of stealing a person's story, of jeopardising their journey into the next world, of editing what is left for him to be remembered by. He has worked to prevent us from making a judgment on this soul. This is the work of the blanks. There is a long pause, and now no one is cheering. They look frightened. I can confirm, friends, that Connor Drew's actions were not without motive. He was acting in league with the blanks, aiming to incite a rebellion. He has confessed to having contact with the blanks. He is working with them. Shouts rise through the crowd. How could he? Here is evidence of their ways. This is just the beginning. We must fight. The blanks are back and are using our own men to steal our skin, our stories, our souls. They will not stop at this. It is not our souls they truly desire, but our destruction. For the blanks hunger and thirst for our land. They won't be happy until they have overtaken our cities, towns, homes and beds. They desire our land and will stop only when every one of us is without a home and without a hope in our own world. A woman next to me is weeping. I don't want to cry, not here. So I breathe deeply against the tears and sickness and tell myself to keep my head. There have been rumours for some time that the blanks are on the rise, that they will return and ruin us. I didn't want to believe it. I hadn't believed it until now. You know our history. You've seen the evidence in the museum. When the blanks were among us, they maimed and dismembered their victims in order to steal their marks, stories and souls. They, a weak and lowly people, clawed at our bodies because they wanted to make us like them. They wanted to overcome our strength and righteousness and claim our land. The land that God gave us and Saint died for. We will not allow this, of course, but justice must be done. Connor Drew stands with those evil blank rebels, and he does not stand alone. He is the first of a plague that we must stamp out. Now, my friends, you know that a person can't play God without expecting that God might one day choose to play with him. This man tried to change one human's eternity, and in return, he will forfeit his own. He will know what it is to have his future wiped out. I look around at the silent crowd and feel the cold air drive a shiver through my body. They're going to kill him? They're going to kill him in front of us all. Is that what everyone's here to see? I don't want to witness this. Someone coughs, and the people in the crowd begin to shift their feet and whisper to each other. Mayor Longsight is looking at us, his face serene. He's completely in control. I relax a little. I close my eyes and picture his marks. And once again I think of the words we said when he was appointed. I whisper them to myself and feel calmer. He is good. He is wise. He is the best of us. He is not cruel. He loves us. We will not fear. He does all things for our good. I tell myself I am not worried. I am not afraid. Hold him, please, Mayor Longsight says to the guards. His voice is gentle and courteous. They force the man to his knees and place his forehead onto the wooden block that has been waiting on the stage. I look at my feet, but hear the man groan and struggle against their strong arms. There is a gasp through the crowd, and I can't help but look back up again. Longsight has a slim case in his hands. I watch him open it carefully, and with a flourish he takes out a knife, a short-bladed but gleaming in its readiness. He stands over the criminal, one foot either side of his body, grasping the prisoner's hair to hold him still and to reveal the bare skin of his neck. Like a lamb to the slaughter, I don't want to watch, but I can't look away. He brings the knife down, and a thick lock of the man's hair falls to the ground, like a sheep to the shearer. I'm so relieved I cry out a laughing sob. He'll be okay. He's not going to be killed. The woman next to me looks at me sharply. It's no laughing matter. You watch this. Watch this and remember. The man is weeping. The guards have hold of him still, but he seems punctured. His fight has gone, as though he's given himself over to his fate. Longsight raises the knife high, and as he does, a man dressed completely in black comes to the stage. Two assistants follow with a stool and a table laden with the kit. And then I know what's going to happen. As Longsight wipes his knife and returns it to the case, the man sits and takes a razor from the table. Carefully, he shaves the back of the prisoner's head. Then he removes his black gloves, discards them, and puts on a fresh pair. I see him lift the familiar machine, ready the skin, and then begin to work on the scalp just above the hairline at the back of his head, dipping the needle into a small inkwell on his workstation. The prisoner groans but keeps still, the guards still holding him help. There's a commotion in the crowd, and I see a young man shoving his way through, fighting to reach the platform. I see the guards tense. Before he can get close, some of those around him reach for him and drag him away. I see his face as they leave, blank with horror, glasses knocked askew, and for a moment I imagine our eyes meet. The inking continues. It doesn't take as long as some of the tattoos I've seen, but still the buzz of the machine wheedles into my mind like a dull tinnitus. I begin to feel weak as I stand and half watch, half dream, while the man in black completes the mark. Then, with a sudden absence of sound, the machine stops, and the inker stands up. He returns the machine to the table and, with a final respectful nod to the mayor, walks away. Mayor Longsight, who has been standing at the back of the stage while the mark was made, steps forward to the microphone. Today, my friends, you have just seen justice done. This man will remain in our society. We are generous. His hair will grow and his ink will be hidden, but he has received the mark of the forgotten. Something pierces the numbness in my brain. The forgotten? When this criminal dies, this mark will be read. This mark will convict him, and his book will be destroyed in the flames of fire in the great hall of judgment. How could you live once you've been marked as forgotten? How could you go on, knowing none of it matters, that your life will end at death and oblivion? All I hope is that I will ascend to the ranks of the remembered. That's what we live for. But right here, this man's hope has been blotted out by black ink. Forgotten. A dull peal is ringing in my brain, something I'll remember if only I let myself. Friends, let this encourage you to live lives worthy of the calling we have received. Live lives to be remembered. Don't let this man's failure be in vain. A whisper goes through the crowd, ending up as a held-back roar. People are cheering. People are shouting. People are saying over and over, "A crow, a crow. The mark is a crow." Forgotten. And I remember now. I remember everything. The man's howl merges with my own and I run home, the bag of onions banging against my thigh, and the soot from the potatoes still under my nails. A crow, a crow. The mark is a crow.